to Vin and Mike, episode 19. And then this week, there is no Mike. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But I'm really happy to have my good buddy, Brandon Wirth, on with us today. Brandon, how are you?
I'm great, Vin. How are you? It's a pleasure to be on the program, man.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. We'll go into, what you're doing, what you're gonna do future in this business, and what you're currently doing. A lot of good stuff. Can't wait to dig into all that, and then we'll talk about where you're from, dig into some of that sports, and we'll get to that. But before we get into all that, we got to go to our official partner of the Vin and Mike Show, and that is Viggy Bets. And now the Vin and Mike Show is brought to you by Viggy Bets. Check out Viggy Bets on Twitter and Instagram at Viggy Bets. If you DM Viggy Bets now that you are a fan of Vin and Mike, you'll receive a 14-day free trial on a new VIP membership. Viggy Bets is one of the best handicappers when it comes to no-run first inning and some of the best parlays out there. He's also the winner of the Top Cappers Charity Classic the first quarter. So check him out now at Viggy Bets. So yeah, it's always fun when you have a sponsor there, Brandon. So everyone, Mike is sitting in this nice little place with oysters all shucked and boats floating by as he sends me pictures, from his Instagrams and DMs and texts. And this is what he does to me all week as I sit here in a rainy, humid day in New York. And that's what he's done. But he's allowed me to bring in Brandon. And let me just give everybody a little overview of Brandon Wirth, who he's an impressive guy to me. He is a 3-year student athlete at Ferris State, where he runs cross country and track and field, where I can't even run out my front door. So that impresses me, right off the bat. He's majoring in sports communications. He's also has his own podcast up there at Ferris State, the MVSP podcast. And he's a Michigan born, raised, all the fun stuff that Detroit sports brings to people in Michigan, or maybe the lack of fun that's been Detroit sports the last few years. But we'll get into that. And that's my man, Brandon Wirth. So Brandon, go ahead, give me some of what you got.
Yeah, I could definitely tell you the passion, maybe not the prominence of Detroit sports. That's definitely what you get here in the Mitten. But yeah, I'm very jealous, though, of Mike being able to be in the sun, because I'm pretty sure we had almost a sleet storm this last week, and now we're sitting in 85-degree weather, and I don't know what to think of it. I think Mother Nature's truly just dumps all the leftover weather that she distributes from each state, and then we just get the leftovers, and that's just really drives me crazy. But yeah, absolutely, the MBSP has been a pleasurable project that me and my co-host Joe Nagy, who's unable to join us as well, he's also soaking up the sun in Florida with the Hurricane Elite Golf Tour right now, so he's definitely enjoying life on the links. I've already seen pictures of him as well. So Vin, I feel you there, my man. It is definitely a little bit of a struggle, but I appreciate the offer as well. I mean, we've done some great things being able to highlight Ferris State sports as well as the Michigan collegiate and professional sports as well. It's been a huge pleasurable honor to be able to start that up and being able to be successful through our 3rd season now this year. So we've had a lot of blessings along with the process, and it's been a fun ride. It's definitely been able to be a pleasurable experience highlighting all that Ferris State has to offer, as well as be able to get into all the good stuff like we will later in this episode for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think a lot of people know too much about Ferris State, but it's a legit NCAA Division II program where you run cross country. Can you just tell me a little bit about that cross country?
Yeah, running in the Great Lakes Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, or the GLIAC as it's called, is definitely one of the tougher tasks as Division II. I would argue it's the best overall, all-around sports conference in the Division II level across the country. There's a couple that are certainly in that running for sure, but our running is legit. We have to face nationally ranked programs like Grand Valley State is one that comes to mind. Is Saginaw Valley State as well, Wayne State, a lot of other really reputable programs that have produced Olympic trial athletes, a lot of these elite level national champions. And it's cool to be the best of the best and to compete against them. And that was one of the reasons I came to Ferris State. I'm from just 20 minutes up the road from campus, and being able to really contribute and build up that program was a huge asset for me coming out of high school, that I was looking forward to. And then being able to not only do that, but be able to get a degree in something that I'm truly passionate about in sports communication. I grew up, like a lot of kids out there, aspiring to be a play-by-play broadcaster, listening to some of the best like Vin Scully, Gus Johnson, that bring just the memories of games. And really, it's such a unique part of sport that kind of falls through the cracks a lot. We remember memories of games, of those huge moments of the David Tyree catch, for example, all of those just distinct memories, but the call behind it is also what brings it just as much. And that's something that really caught to me as a kid. And of course, growing up to be a professional player and then learning, it's not for everybody. So you got to find another outlet. And that certainly was one for me. And I'm really loving the path that I've taken right now in that position. And it's been truly a blessing.
Yeah, I like that you said the memorable calls. The one that always comes to mind for me as being a little bit older than you is the Al Michaels "Do You Believe in Miracles" when
Absolutely.
Team USA in 1980 beat Russia. To me, it's still one of the best calls. Every time they play it, I still get those chills. I didn't watch it live. I'm not, I wasn't that young, to watch, or that old to watch it, but I knew a lot about it growing up, right around that time and everything. The amazing call. Al Michaels, some of the best calls that I've ever seen, and I'm happy you're getting into that field too. Real excited for you. Look forward to what you bring in the future. But for now, let's get into the show and dig into the nitty gritty of professional sports and really talk about these NBA playoffs from this weekend and where it stands. And I think like most, I'll throw out the first game that I think everybody's been talking about all day, and that's Dallas Phoenix, and some of my thoughts on what I saw last night. Luka Doncic basically said, "I'm your modern day Larry Bird. I'm your modern day Dirk Nowitzki. I'm going to shoot this three-pointer over you, and if you think I'm going to miss, I'm not. And if you try to get too close to me, I'm going to go right by you, and then I'm going to laugh at you for every time that I do this to you and make fun of the people in the stands that are heckling me, and I'm going to heckle them back." And basically showed that he was the alpha out there last night, and really took it to Chris Paul. And the one thing I heard, which I thought was an unbelievable stat today from CBS Radio, sports radio, was this was Chris Paul's fifth time being up 2-0 in a 7-game series and lost. And when you think about that, that's 5 games left out of a 7-game series. So in order to lose, you either have gone 0-4 or 1-4 in those final 5 games. And that says a lot. I know Chris Paul's a Hall of Fame player. He's put up impressive numbers. But when it comes down to these big games, I think he just doesn't show up. And now at 37 years old, I don't know if he's going to have another run here. I think Phoenix, might have been their only shot. A lot of good young teams coming up. Memphis coming up. We know Golden State's always going to be good. This Dallas team looks really impressive. We know the Clippers are going to be coming back with Kawhi and Paul George. So I think this could have been his last shot. So I want to hear some of your thoughts about the Phoenix-Dallas matchup.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that really comes to my mind is I saw the same baffling stat that you did on Chris Paul's record after going 2-0. He might have to change his whole team philosophy in these playoff series. He might have to, is it worth now you have to drop a game just so you stay out of this bad juju? Because Chris Paul is a phenomenal player, and I don't think anybody's arguing that. But I mean, the fact of it is, going down in a series where you're up 2-0, that is something that when you're as an NBA GM, if you're looking at taking a team from a playoff contender to a championship contender, you need that consistency in the big games, right? And I'm not saying that Chris Paul is going to be traded nonetheless or whatever all of that say, but those are the players that you expect to take your team up to the top. And Chris Paul was supposed to be that guy in Phoenix, right? You have the young core around that they've developed so well with guys like Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and even the rising guys of McCall Bridges, Cameron Payne that were big parts in this series as well. But it's really tough, and I don't want to be that guy, but of course, for radio perspective, we got to break and make the noise of, is there a little bit of this James Harden-esque rubbing off on Chris Paul now from their time together in Houston? I'm not sure, but ever since then, you can't deny that Chris Paul's been a different player in the postseason since those two came together. I'm not sure what it is. I'm not sure if it's going to take like another lucky sock or something to change up the mojo, but it's not looking good. And you got to give credit to Jason Kidd, Luka Doncic, and that Dallas Mavericks team for really stepping up, especially over the last two games. Not only offensively, defensively, they were fantastic, forcing these tough shots with Phoenix, and a lot of good shot makers on that team as well. A lot of players that are able to find the open man and make those creative looks. But Dallas really took it to them, and they made their shots. I mean, they were 48% from 3-point in that clinching Game 7. And that's just really tough to really torch the flame. And when you're up 57-27 at one point in a ball game, yeah, it's tough to come back from that one. And we certainly saw what it can take a toll on a franchise, because I'm sure Phoenix fans that were sitting at home or in that home arena are still feeling the effects of what it just really felt just to take the dagger in Game 7 in a game that all of us believed that they should have won.
Yeah, I was looking at the score. It was 38-24 Dallas. They called timeout. I had to run and do something, and I got caught up and then came back, and Barkley was on during halftime and saying he'd like to see them get the lead down to 14 by the end of the third quarter. So I took out my phone to see, and it was, like you said, 57-27. So now I'm like, they went on a 19-3 run to end this half. But the game at that point was over. They came out that third quarter. I think at one point it was 62-27, something like that. They was up by, I think, 40 at one point. As we know, the final score was 125-90. And this was a home and home series throughout. You know, the first 3 games went back and forth with the home team winning. A lot of people thought this was going to be the game. Dallas got blown out because a lot of their number 2 and 3 kind of players didn't really show up on the road all season, especially in this series. And Spencer Dinwiddie really showed up when it counted. So, you know, a lot of people thought that Porzingis trade was just, you know, dumping somebody that's always hurt and getting salary off, and we'll just bring back whoever just to whoever we can get. And it ended up being a fantastic trade for them here, getting them to the Western Conference Finals. I was really, really impressed by that. But talking about Harden real quick, I don't know if you heard Joel Embiid's quote today about Harden when they were asking him. And he basically said, "We're not getting the Harden from Houston that people thought we're getting," in that big Cambodian accent that he had. He had me cracking up. So, you know, he's just telling the truth that Harden is just not the same player anymore. And I don't know if he ever was that kind of clutch kind of player for this Philadelphia team and the way that they played, you know, down the stretch there in that series. But you know, I was telling somebody today that I think this Miami team is a little underrated still, even as a 1 seed. You know, I think maybe just because they have Jimmy Butler, and some people don't really look at him as a top 10 player, even though I think in these kind of moments he's always shown to be a big-time playoff player. He's played on a lot of different teams where he's really shown up. I like Bam. I think the only thing I don't like about Miami is they shoot a lot of threes for some reason when they don't really have to. I think they could get the ball to Butler and Bam and work the ball inside. But, it's the way their game is. They play tremendous defense. I think they're going to be a tough team moving forward. What do you think? Do you think Miami's people are just underrating them at this point?
Yeah, I think they sort of are falling in that narrative as far as a team that's kind of getting slept on because, I mean, especially the way that you kind of look at this Miami team, it's not the same dynamic as we've seen some of these star-studded teams like Golden State and Philadelphia 76ers, for example. And I frankly thought the 76ers were going to run out of the series and that they were going to end up playing Boston, which I got half of that correct. But I think that when you looked at how that series went down, I mean, having Embiid banged up didn't help them. And that's a certain fact of that because that series would have probably changed if Embiid would have been fully healthy. And obviously, if we would have at least just a small portion of the James Harden that we see in the regular season, it would be a different ball game. But at the reality, that's just kind of what seemed to have fizzled out at one point somewhere along the line. I'm not sure where that bad mojo came from, and I know he's still trying to shake it to this day. But I think when I look at Miami, I see a lot of that gritty toughness, the willing to we're gonna play these defensive games and even to close it out 99-90 against the 76ers. No triple digits from either team. Them showing that we can play this tough defensive, gritty Miami basketball with guys that play phenomenal defense with Gabe Vincent. You mentioned Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, some of the best on-ball defenders. And you have the contributions off the bench with Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson. And I think when you have so many of those talented shooters, I can think that definitely complements the point of they're not afraid to take those shots when they have a lot of those shooters. And that's kind of something where you're kind of seeing them fall a little bit into that Golden State kind of esque. But in the reality is their defense and their physicality is what's winning them games. And I think if they can continue to do that forward, I think Boston's a really good team. I really like where they're at right now going into this postseason after taking down such a prominent team like Milwaukee that was destined to potentially go back to back. But at the reality is, I mean, they're gonna be playing basically almost another kind of Milwaukee team again with the defensive prowess that Milwaukee showed. That's a tiring series going into 7 games. Now potentially they're gonna have to do that again against a team like Miami that's had quite a bit of rest now if they're taking out Philly in 6. But I really like where that Miami team is at, but I can really understand with, like when we look at where these teams were going in the postseason, Miami's just not the standout star-studded team like a lot of people are starting to root for in this season's NBA for sure.
Yeah, I think people look at, Giannis and Jokic and Luka and those kind of players, and they don't see that with Miami. But I like that you made the point that Miami is bringing maybe that old school Pat Riley mentality of defense, as we know he still does something with the team somewhere, somehow, part owner or whatever he is. But he's been there for a long time, and it's got that old school Nick Miami kind of mentality that we can play really hard defense and make our shots when they count. They, despite seeing them shoot those amount of threes, and it's like I said, sometimes it felt that much, they were still number one as a team in the NBA in 3-point field goal percentage. So you have to take that into consideration. But I think you make a good point with Boston playing in tough series, against Milwaukee and trying to handle Giannis for 7 games. Giannis is just a whole different, person, right? I mean, it's just amazing to watch a guy that you really know does not have a tremendous jump shot outside of 15, 20 feet. So you can really clog the middle of the floor like Boston tried to do. And I think did successfully, and the reason that's why they won Game 7. But ultimately, he still found the way to score all these points and grab all these rebounds. And I think I was a little disappointed. I thought he started out really well assisting in Game 7 and really finding open shooters. And I thought he got away from that a little bit as the game went on. I thought he was forcing way too many shots. I think if he would have continued going down that path, finding that open shooter, I think they could have had a better offensive game than they did in that game 7. But I give Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart, who I think is, that old school tough guy. I was happy to see he won Defensive Player of the Year. But as we know, Grant Williams had a game of his life, with all those threes. I'm excited for this Boston-Miami series. I think it's going to be one of those really good, tough, rough, defensive, low-scoring kind of series. People that see that over-under number at like 213, 214 are going to trigger those under bets, I think. At least that's what I would do if it was me. And I think that's where we're headed. I'm really excited for them as a whole.
Yeah, it's almost like a complete flip the script as what we potentially see in the Western Conference Finals with Dallas and Golden State both chucking up 43s potentially in Game 1. But I mean, it's certainly going to be a great series. And I mean, I got to give Boston credit. I mean, really what they've been able to do to break out this year, because they've always been that team that seems like, yeah, this is a playoff contending team. They're going to be a 3 seed, 4 seed every year. They just really have been just waiting for that one series where they can just get over the hump and be able to make a run. And this seems like the year to do so, the way that Jason Tatum has been able to take over games. I mean, he has been phenomenal down the stretch in a lot of these games. He's really developing that isolation, give me the rock, I'm going to close this thing mentality that we saw in a lot of these elite scorers in these playoff series. But yeah, I mean, Grant Williams he was phenomenal in that closing game. 27 points for him was something that we did not expect going into that game. We were expecting to probably see Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown trying to outdo Giannis. And I mean, kudos to Giannis for what he did. I mean, I believe he had 200 points, 100 rebounds, 50 assists in that series. The first time a player has ever done that in a 7-game series. That deserves credit right there for what he was able to do to keep his team in the series. That's just incredible to me. And I think that's really kind of when you look at it, kind of taking a step back from this broad plane, is like the Celtics really had guys that stepped up, and Milwaukee just didn't really have that guy to really step up when they really needed it down the stretch. Because I mean, Giannis was going to contribute his, Drew Holiday was certainly going to get his. Not having a guy like Chris Middleton now is really going to have to force guys like Wesley Matthews to have a big game. He was 1 of 5 in that closing game. Grayson Allen maybe would have been that guy. He went 0 for 6, 0 for 4 from deep, right? You need some of those guys to have these big games. I mean, Brook Lopez definitely helped out his case a little bit with the double-double, being able to steal some possessions away. But I mean, when you look at the Celtics, having guys like Al Horford go in a huge way in this series, and then Grant Williams, as mentioned earlier, and even guys like, I was looking down the box score, I forgot Peyton Pritchard had 14 points off the bench in his 17 minutes. I mean, that's a stud. I believe 14 on his plus minus. I mean, that's really efficient basketball right there. And that's something that Boston's been able to have more consistently than Milwaukee, because, I mean, Milwaukee really, when you saw Chris Middleton was out, somebody was going to have to pick up the slack, because Drew Holiday and Giannis were going to take theirs. But after that, we had question marks. This team was really young. Being able to have defensive prowess was something that they definitely had as a positive manner. But when you have these guys on the other side that can still make those tough shots, like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, how are you going to respond? And that's really what showed the outlook of the series.
Yeah, and Robert Williams being out of the series basically with that left knee.
Yeah.
I thought that was a big help, for Milwaukee. I thought they could take advantage of that, but they really never did. And I think you made a really good point with Chris Middleton not being in this series. That there wasn't that third scorer. Like you said, Drew was going to get his. We knew Giannis did his, but there wasn't really someone that consistently shot the outside shot for them, made those threes when it counted. And Grayson Allen had a nice series in the first series. When Middleton got hurt, but he never really stepped it up that much against Boston. No. And then like you mentioned, with the West and the craziness out there, I feel bad for Memphis. I thought they would have played a lot better series if Ja Morant's knee didn't get that deep bone bruise and basically out, for the entire series. Memphis did a really good job all season when Morant was hurt. But when you're in a short series and you play the same team over and over again, you need your star players. You need, those guys to show up, and you see what happens in those kind of games, especially down the stretch in game 4, where they just basically, had a big lead, gave it back. And at that point, the series was over. And Klay Thompson really coming back finally, it looks like, from double injury. Had a tremendous game 5 for them. Really, really stepped up here for Golden State. I think he'll be a big X factor moving forward in the series. Do you think Golden State will throw Draymond on Luka? Do you think that their game plan?
I think if you're Steve Kerr, assuming he's going to be back in time, obviously from protocols, I think that's got to be one of the 1A decisions you might have to make looking forward in this series. For what we've seen from Luka so far, like, I think you have to consider that, because Draymond is one of the best oddball defenders on this team. They definitely going to be relying on him in a major way. So I think you have to consider that, in the sense of, when you're looking at what Dallas has done, you definitely have your eye on some of their other players that you're going to be considering. What are we going to do when we're going to be, they're going to be in a 5-out scenario, and it's going to be near the end of the game, because they're probably going to keep it close, right? The Mavericks can still score at an elite level. There's no question about it. And obviously now they can play defense, what they showed, what Jason Kidd's adjustments did in game 6 and game 7. But when you're looking down the line, when at the end of a game, you're going to have guys like Jalen Brunson out there. You're going to be having guys like Reggie Bullock, Dorian Finney-Smith, and you're going to have Spencer Dinwiddie on the floor at some point, changing probably in and out, defensive, offensive changes. What are they going to do when Luka doesn't have the ball in his hands? It's going to shorten the playbook up. So you're going to imagine it's going to be in the ball in his hands, and especially the way he's been able to finish, I have to imagine that Draymond's going to be on him, and they're going to try to get it in somebody else's hands, because I think if you're Golden State, you're going to feel better if you have somebody like Spencer Dinwiddie and Jalen Brunson hitting shots at the end of games, rather than Luka, because that's what Luka's going to do. He's going to have the ball in his hands with 2 minutes left. You couldn't live with yourself if you're Steve Kerr, knowing that's going to happen. But I think that it's going to be an interesting possibility, especially with some of the size that they can put in at certain points. If they have guys out there like Dwight Powell, like David Bertans, and to have some of those guys out there, obviously you're going to be wondering how Looney's going to be in that rotation, especially with Kuminga's going to have some minutes, especially to stretch the floor in those potential running situations, run and gun down the lane and that fast break. So I think, if you're Steve Kerr, I think you have to consider putting Draymond on Luka, because you have to slow him down in order to get Dallas off balance. Phoenix wasn't able to do that. So now you got to look, that's going to be our best bet to do that moving forward in that series.
Yeah, I think they would have tried to use Gary Payton II, and we'll see if he can come back in the series. There's some optimism that he might be able to come back in the series. He's, as you said, as an on-ball defender, you can rotate him and Draymond, and even Klay plays good D. I just don't know if he's the same defender he was, prior to injury. I found it interesting in Kidd's press conference last night that he mentioned Stephen A. Smith without mentioning Stephen A. Smith when he said, well, someone was supposed to get blown out in this game. It just happened not to be us, which, Stephen A. made it a point that, Phoenix was going to blow Dallas out of the arena, that the secondary players weren't good on the road, which we mentioned earlier. And I happen to agree with Stephen A. when he said it, because I just felt that, Phoenix just had the momentum, in every home game. I like the way Booker plays at home compared to the road. And I thought Chris Paul would finally figure a way to step it up. But really what it came down to is Luka was just much better than everybody on the court. And I think sometimes, as much as we say it and we always look at it, I think sometimes the best player on the court is usually the team that wins. Maybe a little different with Milwaukee and Boston, but I think that sometimes Tatum was the best player on the court. I know Grant Williams scored more points than anybody in Game 7. So it's some of that. Sometimes it's just that best player on the court is the reason, you win a game, and I think that's really what you see from Dallas. It'll be a really interesting series, and how they defend Steph and Clay and all the 3-point shooting that they love to shoot, as you mentioned, and then is Looney going to play more? I know they really wanted him to be in the starting lineup in that final game against Memphis, which I think he had like 11 rebounds in like the first like 11 minutes or something ridiculous like that. Yeah, so I think they're gonna try to use him and take advantage of that, his size and things like that, and try to force, I'm guessing, Dallas to do what they did to Phoenix and shoot 48% from 3-point land.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Gary Payton as well. That was something that I forgot to mention there, that injury is now going to cause you to have that conversation. Because if Gary Payton was on the floor, there's no doubt he's going to be in there to slow down Luka Doncic. That's certainly it. But yeah, it's certainly interesting that you brought up that press conference of there's always that MO of you always hear these teams, these executives, these coaches saying, no, we tune the media out. We're in our own bubble. Like this, we're focused on us. And then you see Jason Kidd come out and make an informal reference to that conversation of, we are listening a little bit. You can keep that chitter chatter up, and we're going to keep winning games and making you guys look like fools almost as an incentive to keep moving forward. So you kind of have that feeling with this Dallas team of they're playing with a chip on their shoulder. They are a team that has always been kind of, I wouldn't necessarily mocked up, but on a hockey term, almost the Toronto Maple Leafs of, yeah, they're going to get there, but they're going to get stuck somewhere, and they're not going to go any farther in a series, where now that you're playing against the top seed, the undisputed, yeah, this is the team going into the season. We're putting bets on to repeat as NBA finalists and be able to win the chip this year. And being able to take them out, and I mean, even a spark of rivalry in that game of Luka and Devin Booker certainly was one that we'll watch, and the memes will continue to flood in on all of our social media feeds from now until probably next season starts, honestly, and even past that. But I think you definitely have that MO of, like, you have Golden State in this series that are going to be the favorites. There, you have three of the top shooters in the NBA and Steph, Clay, and Jordan Poole, and you're almost in the situation of, off what you saw from last series, if you're Dallas, you're going to want to make sure that you get on top 3-2 and not be down 3-2, because you're going to have to double number 11 or the series is going to be over because of what that man can do in game 6. But the reality is, the way that Dallas has been able to take that challenge, take all the media, take everybody against them, and being able to play fundamentally good basketball and execute their game plan to the best that you possibly can in that moment, where some teams have slacked, that have been those top seeds or those top ranked teams, that the fundamentals, that core talent, along with that young development players, you've been able to do that. And that's why teams like the Warriors, like the Celtics, have been able to build these prominent backcourts, have been able to have guys behind them and come in. And that's really gave them not only the versatility moving forward as a franchise, but it's given them the prominence to be able to, when the series is in their hands and somebody's not hitting, somebody can step up. And right now, Dallas has been able to do that. Like, Luka's been playing out of his mind, but we also have to give credit to Jalen Brunson and those guys like Spencer Dinwiddie that have been showing out as well when the chips are down. And that's what's showing me that they are a capable team of going in this series. I expect this series to go 6-7 games for sure, and I'd be surprised nonetheless. But at the end of the day, if you're Dallas, keep that chip on your shoulder. That's the best way you're going into this series, because everybody's going to be putting money on the Warriors, right? It's about time the dynasty has been revamped. It's about time they've made it back. It's about time we're going to see Steph and Clay in the finals again. And it's really one of those where it's round 3 for Dallas. The chips have been against them this whole series, this whole postseason run. Keep it going. That's what's being successful for them.
Yeah, it's definitely a real interesting run. Mike made a good point on an earlier episode when the playoffs first started, that he felt there was no clear cut favorite, that the playoffs were wide open and anybody could come out of any conference. And I think it's after seeing the two finalists and the champion from last year, both losing game sevens, we're basically on that pathway right now. And I'm glad you made the point to talk about how these teams are built, in like Boston and Golden State, through the draft, and homegrown guys that they drafted, they brought in. I always talk about how Danny Ainge was able to trade down from the number one pick and go to number three, and Markelle Fultz and Lonzo Ball were 1 and 2, and then Tatum was 3. Where Ainge the whole time was going to take a forward, because I think they had a couple of, I forgot who the other. I know still had Marcus Smart. They had a couple other guys in the backcourt that they had. I forget who they had, but they weren't going to draft a guard basically. And he traded down, got more value, took Tatum, and moved forward. It reminded me, I just watched the Chris Webber Penny Hardaway draft, in that Orlando did the same thing to Golden State and forced Don Nelson to give up 3 first-round picks and Penny Hardaway to get Chris Webber. And then the whole irony of the whole thing is Chris Webber couldn't stand Don Nelson, and they had to end up trading him to Washington in his second year. He didn't really even play, in Golden State at all. So, but to regress, I look forward to these semifinal matchups to move in, these conference finals basically, to move into the NBA finals. And I think it's going to be 2 really good series. Good matchups, like you said, a defensive matchup and a 3-point shooting contest matchup. And we'll see who comes out of it starting, I think, Tuesday, right? I think tomorrow, right? I think so. I think it's tomorrow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tuesday, Boston, Miami, game 1.
Yeah. So it should be fun. So let's now take the NBA, put it a little off to the left here, and let's get into a little of Major League Baseball. And I like to start, and I want to ask you something, as a Yankee fan that I am, someone from the Bronx, been here my entire life, and the whole thing, and watching the Yankees play the Tigers out in Detroit, when Cabrera came up with 2,999 hits, and Boone intentionally walked him in a close game. As a baseball move, it's the right baseball move to make. I felt that at the time. I still feel it now. One of the things I felt, and you're a younger guy, and I want to see how you feel about this, is that people like to collect items now. I think collecting items is much bigger now than it's ever been. And I think everyone wanted that ticket, especially. It's not like the old days where they tear your ticket. Everything is scanned, so it's a whole ticket. You could turn that ticket into an NFT or whatever else you do with it, or you get Miguel Cabrera to sign it, and all this stuff. I think all the boos, as much as people were upset that they didn't see history, I think people were upset that they lost their ability to have the 3,000 hit game ticket and maybe potentially get it signed by Cabrera. What are your whole feelings and thoughts on that whole Cabrera situation? Who, by the way, we knew he was going to get his 3,000 hit. We're only in April, so to me it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Literally before we went on air, I was actually going through some of my cards actually to see values for them already, because the collectibles are certainly starting to pick back up again. I think you hit the nail right on the head there. And NFTs, I mean, I'm not into that sort of thing as far as those collectibles. Starting to kind of understand them. To me, it's like, give me something hard copy in my hand that I know I can keep and hold on to in my room under a lock and key, almost, over something that could potentially be taken on the internet. Yeah, a lot. But I think that there's something with that series that I think really stuck out of where you look at where Aaron Boone was in that situation in that moment. Everybody almost in the stadium is rooting against you, right? In that scenario. And you kind of learned a little bit of, he can be aggressive at times, but he's a conservative manager, because I think you look at some of the other managers in baseball that would have been in that same scenario. I mean, especially that have played against the Tigers in past. I mean, you look at some like Ned Yost would have been a more aggressive manager in that situation. I would have no doubt he would have pitched to him. But in the reality of it is, in that moment of with the backstory behind it, and of course the story that it unfolds later of, yeah, the pitching thing. It was about the pitching thing that the Yankees during the draft process were telling him he was going to have to make it to the league in the pitcher, right? Of course. It's the perfect timeline, the perfect headline, the perfect storyline to that's where he gets the 3,000 hits. So, of course, when you see that scenario of the intentional walk happen, to me, it's like, okay, it's kind of almost like he's too scared at that point, which obviously we can take away one moment, and that's not necessarily to judge a man on his whole entire career and his whole philosophy of managing baseball in one moment. So as a younger fan though, I like the difference that you'd make, because I think like in years past, with the amount of analytics that we've had in baseball as well, that we wouldn't be seeing some of these decisions being made in some of these crucial moments. Because I mean, earlier this year, we had a no-hitter that was going through 7 innings and Kershaw was pulled. And the reality is, in the older times, would we have been considering that? I don't think we would in that scenario. Obviously, he was still coming off of some soreness and that sort of thing, so pitch count was into play.
And he's still on the injured list no matter what, right?
Yeah, it's almost like at that point, my arm could be, I mean, I used to pitch in high school and even had some lower college offers, and like there were games where you were in that moment, it's like, I'm not coming out of the game until somebody gets me. I don't think that you as a pitcher, I could take that coming off the mound of, yeah, I've been this good, and I was just pulled out for precautionary sake because the lefty on lefty matchup's better. And he looks fatigued on the mound. I don't know how I'd feel about that. So in those scenarios, when you're relying on the analytics as much as the moment, and that's exactly what Boone was saying in that situation is, we like the matchup behind him against a guy out of the pen. So it's just one of those scenarios where you're leaning on the numbers almost as much as the moment, and that's how much baseball is changing. So now you have the argument, obviously, between the eras of some of the olders that are saying he chickened out, and then some of the younger guys are saying, oh my gosh, that he's using just data. And now where's the hard line of where we're going to see managers going forward to be able to balance that? And that's certainly that this moment unveiled in a crucial way.
Yeah, it's funny, we talk a lot here about New York baseball. Me and Mike are both out of the New York City metro area, so we always talk about Yankees and Mets, and it was an interesting topic, for us on one of the shows, and we dove into it. But you look at, we always look at the Yankees are the team in sports for us in this area, right? We don't look at the Dallas Cowboys as America's team. We don't look at anything, like that. Even though the values, or however you want to put it, it doesn't matter to us, And when you talk about that move by Aaron Boone and all the F-bombs being dropped and everything throughout it, you forget that we still have that evil empire effect on the rest of sports, right? Like people still look at the Yankees as the evil empire, right? Like the old Pedro Martinez Boston matchups, you guys are my daddy, and then all that crazy stuff that's gone on through the years, and you forget all that. But I did look, again, I think you make a really good point with analytics and how guys, just don't don't pitch the way they used to. They want guys to really go 5-6 innings, and they have 12 guys in a bullpen now. Every guy in that bullpen can throw 100 miles an hour. I only need 15 pitches out of these three guys on this night, and then you guys are off the next day, and I have three more like you, as long as my starter can give me six, and that's the way teams are moving forward. And I think that's how teams are really setting themselves up. And I think starting pitching is taking a step back. We just had Hunter Green and the Reds throw a no-hitter and lose, right?
Yeah.
But Hunter Green got pulled himself at 7 1/3 innings while he's throwing a no-hitter as well. And he's a young guy. He's not, Kershaw, I get it. He's on the injured list now. He could be out for who knows how long. His back is shot. And I think the Dodgers wanted to keep him healthy as much as they can, try to get 15 starts out of him, and they hope that he's around in October, because we know the Dodgers will be around in October. But I think you made a really good point that analytics play a big role in a lot of different things when it comes to how teams are managing every aspect of things. I want to ask you a little bit more about the Tigers. They're a team that's in rebuild mode, as we're aware. Who's the one guy that maybe is currently on the team that's starting to inspire people, that they feel is the guy that could be the head of the franchise and build a team around?
Yeah, as a Tigers fan, for sure that there was a lot of optimism in this upcoming season, and obviously don't have to mention the record off the top of the hat, but it's certainly not as great as Motown fanatics would like it to be at 12-23. But I mean, this was a team that I would say around every sports personality, writer, there were so many people that would say this is an 85-90 win ball club. And there's no question about it. And obviously we've started off slow, but I mean, over the last couple of years and the last couple World Series winners can definitely prove by itself with statistics that record in the first 50 games doesn't always determine who's going to win the World Series. So there's still time in that aspect. But to answer your question, the number one guy that I really think could be the face of the franchise. Obviously, there's a couple obvious favorites with guys like Spencer Torkelson, who's obviously made his MLB debut this year. He started off a little bit slower than everybody would like to see, but you still have so many great players outside of him. We just signed Javi Baez this offseason to fill our shortstop spot. And he's a great player. Is he going to be the future of the franchise? I don't think he's going to personally be here for the next 5 years. Obviously, he's going to be great now, but will he be over here 5 years? We don't know, because we have a lot in the farm as well that could potentially take his spot. But one guy that I think could be a fantastic player for this franchise, I think, really, the one guy that I think is not necessarily the top guy that you would think at the top of your head, but I think Tariq Skubal is awesome. I mean, the left-hander out of California is one that I have had the appreciation of watching his craft develop over the last half of a season last year and the start to this season. He's been a really inspiring story, because he wasn't the guy that we're looking at as the number one starter, because we got Eduardo Rodriguez deal made with Boston to get him signed, and then we have guys like Casey Mize as well that are going to be above him in the depth chart. But what he can deliver, and I think it just really makes a testament to his work ethic to being able to stay in that part of the rotation. He's developing every year. He's getting better. And I mean, he's been great so far this season. I mean, he started 7 games. He's only allowed 11 earned runs. That by itself with 45 strikeouts. He's been fantastic. So he's on pace for potentially winning up to 15-20 games for sure. And I mean, all of his outings, he's been the guy that's going 5-6 innings. And I think that's something that we're not seeing as many of a lot of these starters now going, like you just mentioned, Vin, is we're seeing teams, they're so heavily relying on a lot of these bullpens are starting to be crafted around. These are matchup specific pitchers. So you're looking at potentially anywhere from 1 to 3 batters, and that could be it. you're not looking at 1, 2, 3 innings. It's 1 to 2, 3 batters. And that might not even get you through an inning in some cases, where you're seeing so many of these now, these hybrid guys that can start, but you don't see them as going the 7, 8 innings in a Kershaw-esque mode, or a Justin Verlander, to bring example for a Detroit perspective. These guys that can long withstand this stamina of work. But you still have these guys that you can insert there. Like, well, that's what kind of we did with Michael Fulmer for a little bit, was have him be that kind of flex guy. Starter gets in trouble, he comes in, he's got the experience, and he can be able to kind of fill that gap until you get to that 6th, 7th inning when you're starting that cycle up of using your bullpen guys. And I think the Tigers bullpen certainly, I mean, our pitching has definitely got us there. I think our pitching's been pretty solid so far. Our bats have been the absolute travesty of the season so far, as we've only scored I think we were last or second to last in the league in runs, and I think we're on pace to actually have less home runs this upcoming season than some individual guys did last year in the 40 mark. That's not going to win games in a especially for you as a Yankees fan, seeing that you're going to see potentially 1 to 2 bombs a game, having guys like Aaron Judge and Carlos Stanton on your roster, where we've had a lot of those guys in our system that we know can do that, but they just haven't found the barrel on the baseball yet. And I think that's been the downfall. But yeah, to answer your question, I think that a lot of, you ask public opinion, probably Torkelson, probably going to be looking at guys like Casey Mize, Matt Manning, but I think that Tariq Skubal could be awesome, just so off of his development already this beginning of the year. I think he can be in the face of the franchise, and I'll die on that hill until it proves otherwise.
Yeah, that's good stuff right there. I like to hear that perspective, because you're sometimes in a bubble here in New York. You listen to national news, you pay attention to everything. But like everybody, baseball, I always feel, is more local than any other sport, that you really stay in tune with your team, the minor league systems, the guys that are coming through your AA and AAA systems, who's going to be your next big star. And it was good for you to provide some of that input on what Detroit is looking to do from the Tigers' perspective. I'll give you something today where Yankee fans are going to be a little crazy. They're playing Baltimore, and Judge is not playing today. And
brother.
Aaron Hicks is playing center field, who everybody now in New York wants to kill Aaron Hicks. Joey Gallo is come off the snide a little bit, but everybody now around here wants to kill Aaron Hicks. They're tired of this guy. So as soon as you see a Judge sit or a Stanton sit, especially the way they're hitting both of them right now, it's berserk here. And this is a team's 25-9 that at one point was 5-5 on the year. So they're 20-4 in their last 24 games. And what do we complain about? That Aaron Hicks is playing and Aaron Judge isn't, but it is Baltimore, and I get it. We want to, they want Judge to hit 3 home runs a game. Everybody wants to see that from Aaron Judge all the time. And I think we will eventually. I'm hoping I know Boone wants him to stay healthy. He wants to get 150 games out of him. He wants to give him these every 10 kind of game rests throughout the year, and cycle them and move in that direction. But yeah, it's funny. As soon as one guy gets on that list, as you would say, they like to beat him down no matter what, until he hits that 3-run homer in the bottom of the ninth to win the game, and then then everyone loves you again in New York. It's that love-hate with guys here like crazy. So I want to take the next step, because I don't want us to run into too much time, and I want to get into your Lions, the over-under for them. I want to hear some of your feelings on Jared Goff and Dan Campbell and all that. But I'd like to start first, and I found this to be kind of interesting. They're over-under 6.5 on DraftKings, and the over is minus 120 right now, and the under is plus 100. So more of the betting money is going on them winning 7 games. Now we have the extra game. We got, we're on 17 games. Do you think this is a team that has 7 wins in them, if not more?
I think on paper you would have to make the argument that there certainly is a good chance that they could win just based off of the schedule. I believe we have the 5th weakest schedule in the NFL this upcoming season. And I think that when you kind of run down the list of teams that you're playing, I mean, we're going to be playing teams. No offense to the New York home, but the Jets and the Giants that are beatable teams, and that's not necessarily saying that they're going to beat them. And I think that's been such a narrative so far of I've heard some people saying 12, 11 wins, and I'm just like, slow your roll. This team's on year 2 of a rebuild. Obviously, we can go down on chalk paper and see, yeah, we're playing the Panthers. We can beat them. We can beat the Jets. We can beat the Jags. We can beat all of these teams. But there's always a couple games every year that you go up and you're saying, oh, we're going to be playing at Chicago week 10. Is that a game that we should win? Sure, we should be able to beat the Bears. They're trending downward. They're kind of in a little bit of a fritz right now offensively that we could probably beat them. And then you go back to last year of Jared Goff having 3 turnovers in the first half, giving up 2 red zone scoring opportunities, and then you end up losing that game. So the reality is, I personally see them as somewhere in the route of, I can easily probably see 5 wins. I can definitely make my way up towards about 7 or 8, and then that's where I catch myself, because there's so many games that are toss-ups in the scenario, especially early on in the season, where I think that's where the season's really going to be won when we're playing teams like we're going to be playing the Philadelphia Eagles week 1, that team that absolutely ran us out of Ford Field the last time we played them last year. And we're going to be playing a team like Washington, Minnesota, who's always going to be playing us tough, in the Patriots before the bye. Those are all teams where you could see a little bit of, they're a little bit higher than us skill-wise. There's no question about it. They're a little bit advanced ahead is where their team is. They're a little bit better on paper. But, I mean, we've shown last year we can play with anybody. And that was kind of the hard thing for me, was seeing a team so young, a roster so undeveloped, so many raw guys getting a second chance, young guys getting their first chance. There was just a lot of inexperience across the board, even with the coaches, even with the general managing staff. Everybody was in their first rodeo. And we were still in these games, which is, I think, why the MO is, especially with the Dan Campbell buzz of being the coach of the year. I can tell you to slow your roll just on that a little bit, because I don't think Rome wasn't built in one day. I'll say that. I'll quote LeBron and cross sports here. But the reality is, I think that we see, as a Lions fan, so much optimism, so much, we got our guys in the draft. We got the free agents we want. We can start to see where this is going, that we're so just ready to jump to the next step already. It's like, oh my gosh, we're so excited. Here we go. We're going to be 10 wins next year. We're going to be 13 wins competing. It's like, whoa. We got to get through 1 year first. And we have to be able to establish the foundation moving forward, because I think that's truly where, to answer the second part of your question with Jared Goff, that I think we are looking to build a foundation around the quarterback position to bring in the proper perfect scenario for a quarterback to come in. And I think I really am digging Brad Holmes on that idea, because I don't like the fact of, oh yeah, Jacksonville's going to get Trevor Lawrence. They're going to win 7 games next year. With who around him? You have Shenault, you have DJ Chark, Marvin Jones. Other than that, is there going to be that much to be able to trump your atrocious defense and win 7 games? I just don't like that. And that's what I really like, is I don't think Jared Goff is that bad of a quarterback. Obviously, he's going to be a stop bridge. I can definitely say that. But in the long term, these next 2 years aren't going to harm you more at him as quarterback, rather than trying to develop a rookie at the same time as you're still developing your foundation of your franchise. I think when 2 teams get too early and do that, that's when they get themselves in trouble. Cincinnati did not do that. And even though they suffered a little bit more than they expected to under Zach Taylor early on, they fit the pieces, then they get Jamar Chase, then they get the defense, and now look where they are. So I really like the idea of holding off on a quarterback just yet. We're going to be able to build that team to where we're a quarterback away. That's when you go get them.
Yeah, and you have a guy that has gone to the Super Bowl. Not that he was the reason the Rams got to the Super Bowl, but he did get there, right?
Right. Yeah.
And he knows how to manage a game. I think that'll be a big thing for the Lions is how they manage games all year and hope that no Justin Tucker's kick 90-yard field goals to beat you
Ugh.
and things like that, right? I mean,
Yeah. It still gives me
crazy
nightmares.
losses. I mean, crazy losses when you look at it. The Minnesota game. I mean, there's just so many crazy losses that Detroit had last year, and I think that's why there's a lot of optimism for that 6.5 over under. Why people in Detroit think 10 wins is a possibility as well. I like to get some of your perspective since Mike is not here, and he loses out, and so you get to move in, and the Jets are 5.5 over. And here's something I found interesting that one of our followers sent to us is that 43% of the over under money for the over was Jets 5.5. So they had the most money for them in the over perspective. That actually is why it's minus 165 for that 5.5 over. And I know they had a fantastic draft on paper, right? Everything is on paper, but you look at that draft, their first 4 picks were all knockouts, all guys that potentially a lot of people thought they were the number one guy for those positions coming out. Some people thought at least top 2 or 3. So they really nailed the draft, even in the 4th round, 5th. I mean, a lot of good players, a lot of young guys coming back. But again, a little different than Detroit, where I think you have a little more of a veteran. Zach Wilson, 2nd year, AFC, much stronger conference than NFC. You look at the quarterbacks all across the board. You look at all these teams. It's just an insane amount of things. But people feel that 5.5 is achievable. What do you see as somebody with more of an independent look at it?
Yeah, when I look at the Jets schedule, I'll be honest, I haven't looked at it fully in depth as some of the other teams in our division, but I mean, just looking at it at a glance, I can definitely see some of the optimism. I mean, obviously, I'll toot my own horn to say that, yeah, the Lions are on the schedule. There's a chance they'll beat the Lions. There's
Right.
no question about it. Both teams definitely, that's going to be a dogfight of a game that won't be on prime time just because of the win-loss record by that point. But then you have games like the Seattle Seahawks later in the season. You have Jacksonville later in the season as well. And it always seems to me that whatever the Jets do in the regular season, no matter if it's thin or bad, Zach Wilson will throw 4 interceptions, or they're going to go to Joe Flacco later in the year that they have done the last couple of years. They still find a one little way to sneak their way in and come out of a game that they had no business winning. There's no chance. I mean, the Titans last year was certainly the one of, no, there's no way that happens, right? Yeah, you're going to be taking the Titans under a 110. They're going to definitely win by 10. And then they go out and they lose. And you're saying, how does that happen? But the Jets just figure out how to win in the Meadowlands at some point against a team they have no business to. So there's definitely that aspect where I'm like, I could lean towards the 5.5 just because of that. And I will agree that the draft process for them was absolutely it was a really knockout draft for them on paper. Obviously, paper won't tell the whole story at the end, but being able to score Garrett Wilson was, I think, just an absolute steal that Atlanta passed on him. Being able to pick up Jermaine Johnson, who is arguably a top 3 edge rusher in what is a really top heavy class in this draft at the end of round 1 is an absolute steal for them. And obviously, you're going to be having 2 dynamic backs with Breece Hall and Michael Carter now that can really bring 2 new elements to your offense. And I mean, you add CJ Ozuma, you add some guys in there at depth wise. You did lose Jamison Crowder to the Bills, but I mean, you still have Braxton Berrios who can kind of fill that role. He's just never really been given the opportunity for how good Crowder's been. So you kind of don't know necessarily how he's going to play, but he could be that kind of a guy that could step up. And maybe this is Denzel Mims' breakout year. We don't know. So the reality to me is, I think offensively they have a lot of pieces that can win you games, especially those winnable games. And obviously they're going to be in contention to shock some teams. The consistency is really the question to me when it comes to the Jets, because in reality, you mentioned it, Zach Wilson throwing 4 interceptions makes them lose by 4 scores, just because they're not necessarily a team that's going to be able to control the tempo as much, for example, as any of the AFC North teams that do that really well with hard-nosed football. And they're just not to that point yet, where they're kind of more of the prototypical NFL. They're going to sling it. They're going to use speed, which is kind of the MO now that a lot of these really good teams are starting to go towards, like Kansas City, like the LA Rams. So, and I look at their defense too, with a lot of those pieces they have there. I mean, they got a lot of really good veteran aspects of players that can really lead a lot of these younger guys as well. Like you have some really good players like CJ Mosley, Quinnen Williams, and being able to add Carl Lawson was huge in the pass rush, which is a department I know they struggled in last year. I like Detroit. So adding to that is going to be huge. I think it's the consistency, but if they can put it together to where there's just a little crack of consistency where they can beat some of those teams, especially down the stretch when they have a lower schedule, I think that they can certainly get to that 5-6 mark. It's just the inconsistency of those games that they know they could win, because those are the opportunities for them where they can really make their mark, because it's going to be hard to be able to beat Buffalo at Buffalo. It's going to be hard to beat New England at Gillette. So to me, I see a lot of that division as dampering them down to that potential 6-win ceiling. But if they can play consistent football, there's no reason this team can't win 6 games. I'll say that for sure. They could definitely win, especially the stretch down at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think, like you said, I think they have a good young nucleus. They added some good free agents on both sides of the ball. They did a lot of good things, but it comes down to Zach Wilson. And I even said he could throw 35 touchdowns next year, and they still might not make the playoffs, because the AFC is just so insane with the amount of quarterback talent and the way things are going to play out. We'll see how it all comes out for them, but I think 5.5 is not a bad bet. Even we're getting -165 at this point, so I think it's still not a bad bet. This was a lot of fun, Brandon. I really enjoyed having you on and digging into everything. I loved your perspective on the NBA playoffs. It was really good to talk to you today and learn more about you, and I really enjoyed having you here today.
Yeah, Vin, it was a pleasure. I appreciate you being able to fill me on the program. Long wishes to Mike out there. That pleasure for you for giving me your seat for the day as well. So it was really fun, and I really enjoyed it. It's always fun to get a new perspective with some of the great sports minds here on some of these digital platforms that you can follow, but you don't necessarily have the chance to talk to. Like, I know that we had that connection that made this possible, and we had known of your show and definitely had been able to see some of the episodes, and being able to now get one together and be able to share the insight has really inspired me too, to look at new aspects of some of these discussions we had. And it's really been a fun time. I really appreciated the opportunity.
Yeah. I think when Mike comes back and your partner Joe comes back, and maybe the 4 of us will get together and do maybe a 4-way kind of show, and maybe we'll do something where we throw some crazy topic out there. We'll have to have opinions, and we'll yell at each other like Skip and Shannon or Stephen A. and everybody else that he brings on, and have one of those kind of fun shows.
Oh yeah. Whenever you have Joe, just talk about the Astros, Spencer Rattler, and you are going to be right on your way. We'll be arguing for the next hour for sure.
That's great. I love it. Again, Brandon Wirth, he's got the MVSP podcast. That's your Twitter handle there at B_Dubs4.
Yep, that is my personal Twitter feed. Our show Twitter is at the MVSP, as well as on Instagram at the MVSP as well. You can follow Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you find your best audio shows. Yeah, it's great. Isn't that great that you just you throw your RSS feed out there and so many different people can listen to you? I love that about what we're doing on our end also. It's just a lot of fun. So absolutely.
All right, this has been great. To our audience, Mike will be back next week. He did say that. Even though I think now at this time he's sitting with some kind of umbrella drink, just hanging out. I think Joe, and maybe he is having a podcast with Joe, and they're comparing umbrella drinks together.
You never know. We'll have to find out.
All right, everyone, have a great night. Brandon, again, thank you. Have
Pleasure.
a good night, everybody. Take care.